Welcome to TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we're going to take a look at the transfer functions of AIM's inventory program. Now, when we're talking about inventory, typically we're talking about inventory coming in from vendors or potentially off-street from customers like trade-ins or purchases or consignments, but then turning around and wanting to sell that product out the front door to other customers. But that's not always going to be the case. There's going to be times when you need to be able to remove inventory from your system for other reasons and not have it getting reported as a sale. So for those instances, we have transfer options. You can transfer inventory out of the system. For those types of products where you transferred it out and that might come back, you can transfer back in. Or if you do have multiple store locations, you can transfer it from one store to another. We're going to take a closer look at this process, how it can be customized, and what it means for your bookkeeping. But before we get into all of that, as always, down at the bottom of the right-hand side, first of all, make sure you've clicked on that chat icon, that chat tab over on the right where the playlist is. And that way you'll see the chat for today's session. That's where you can ask all of your questions relating to inventory transfers. Make sure you click the button down at the bottom where you can then assign your nickname. You don't have to log in with Facebook or Twitter if you don't want. That way you can log in and then say hi and let me know you're here and let me know if you have any questions. So with that being said, let's go ahead and switch over to my AIM screen just like I always do. And let's take a look at inventory transfers. So I'm going to use the drop-down menus just like I usually do because your touchscreen may not be the same as mine. If we go to modules and to inventory, down near you will see the option for inventory transfer options. So anytime you want to move inventory out of your system without it being a sale, this is where you can go. You can see that there are options here for store-to-store transfers, and then likewise for receiving store transfers. We'll touch on that very briefly. What I mainly want to focus on are transfers out and then potentially transfers in. So let's give some hypothetical situations. Let's say you buy a product new from a vendor and you get it unboxed and you get it prepped and ready for sale, and suddenly you realize, oh, this product came in damaged. I need to get it back to the vendor for a replacement of some sort or a credit. So you call up the vendor, you say, hey, I've got a bum product here. What can we do about this? They might say, go ahead and ship it back or whatever. Let's say they go ahead and do that. We want to transfer that out of the system. So to do that, we would come to the Inventory Transfer Out program, and the following screen will appear. It will see up here at the top that it is going to transfer out of my Dubuque location. That's the home location of my workstation here. It's going to ask for a reason, and you've got some reasons in here by default. Every instance of AIM comes with these 6 reasons for transfer out. You've got damage, destroyed, delete inventory, gave for donation, in-store use, lost or stolen, or ship back to vendor. So basically you would choose the reason, and this, in my hypothetical, I'm going to go ahead and choose ship back to vendor. Now, right below that is an RMA field, a return merchandise authorization number. If the vendor gives you one, you will go ahead and you'll plug that into that field. If one is not needed for the type of reason, say for example like lost or stolen or damaged or destroyed, you would simply leave this blank. If the vendor does give you one, though, feel free to fill that in. Now over to the right of that, you'll see 2 drop downs here for customer and vendor. In my example of shipping something back to a vendor, and let's just give it an RMA number of 123 here, I would probably want to track which vendor is receiving these transfers. So what I can do is I can right-click on the vendor dropdown, or I do have the option to change the vendor, and let's just go ahead and select Acme Wholesalers here. So now any activity, any inventory being recorded on this transfer is going to be associated with that vendor, Acme Wholesalers. If this were not a transfer back to vendor, let's say it was a gave for donation, I would probably actually in that instance change the customer account so that way I can say, okay, yes, I did not sell this to this customer, but I did give it for a charity donation or maybe for the purposes of a raffle or anything along those lines. Either way, I'm transferring it out of my inventory and I am not receiving due payment for it. I'm not selling it. I'm essentially just disposing of it, if you will. So, but I'm going to stick with my example. We're going to leave it as ship back to vendor. You might notice that when I choose the ship back to vendor reason, this pending flag is automatically checkmarking itself. You'll notice if I do any other reason, that pending flag does not checkmark. I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. Now, once I've basically established my transfer out, I would then go ahead and put in my quantities and SKUs and how many things I'm transferring out. If I would like, I can come down here and I can put in any notes for the transfer. But then ultimately, when I hit save, that will transfer that product out. And if I would like, I can print essentially not a receipt, if you will, but it's kind of like that, for a paper trail. Now, you don't need to do this. All of this activity is, of course, tracked within AIM. You can always go back and run reports for transfers out and things like that. But if you need to have like just something that you can put into a PIB box or anything like that, feel free to go ahead and print this out. And this can especially also be useful if you are in fact actually wanting to have some paperwork that goes back with the vendor or with the product to the vendor. This could be a great way of having that, especially since it does have the RMA number up here, top center or top in the info area. So now if we go ahead and take a look at the inventory history of that product, my RT14, we will see that is showing a quantity transferred out right here as of 10/22. That was a quantity 1. It was transferred out. The reason was ship back to vendor. You'll notice if I kind of hover over this type drop-down field here, it's kind of giving me that extra detail. So it's basically removed that product from my inventory without doing that as a sale. How did that affect the bookkeeping? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at my ledger report for the day. I'm just going to go ahead and do a ledger by reference. If you're not into bookkeeping, not a big deal, but I just kind of want to show this for the accountants or the managers in the room. We can see that the cost value of that product, $2, was taken out of my inventory on hand, this 120-2, and it was debited into a 201-9 account by default called returns to vendor. You might recall that the 200s are liability accounts for those of you who have attended any of my sessions or have watched the videos on General Ledger 101. So what that means is it's not an expense. It's essentially debiting to the fact that, oh, now this is essentially reducing my liability. What happens with that? Or actually, let me even get to that. How does this know that needs to go into that liability account? Well, I'm glad you asked, since I force-fed you the question. If we go ahead and take a look in what are called the system categories of the AIM ledger maintenance, this is where a lot of the accounting is managed and maintained in the back, kind of the back part of the system. Those specific transfer out reasons are a series of system categories. If we scroll down just a little bit here, and I'm going to point out these handful of system categories here, 1630 through 1635. It may be a little difficult to see. Let me see if I can't zoom in on the screen a little bit more here. So let me do this. Okay, so excuse me. we can see 1630 through 1635. Let me move the mouse over here. 1630 through 1635. These are my system categories that are essentially the definitions of my transfer out reasons. So delete, lost, stolen, ship back to vendor, and so forth. This is also how it knows how to make adjustments to the ledger. So you might recall when I shipped it out to the vendor, it took the value out of the 120 account and it put it into the 2019 account. If I had instead gave it for donation, it would have removed the value, the cost value from the 120 account, and we can see this is tied to a 632-1 donations expense account. So basically, this is how it knows how to affect the ledger whenever we use any of those transfer reasons. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about, actually, I'm gonna cut myself off again. You're not limited to just these 6 system categories for your transfer reasons. In AIM, you can actually have up to 10 of them, 1630 through 1639. But you might notice there's no add button here. What you can do, let's say you wanted to have a reason apart from those 6 for anything at all, we can go to Ledger and System Category Headers in your maintenance area. And let me move this here so it's a little bit easier to see. So you might notice if I scroll here, here's the 1630 through 1635. Let's say we want to add another one. We click the add button and we make that category be 1636, and let's call this live stream example just to give it a name. So we save that, and now that we've saved that, when we go back to the system categories, let's go ahead and make sure I'm sorted by categories. We can see here is now the 1636 live stream example. And now is because this exists, when I go and do that transfer, let's go to the transfer inventory out program, and we'll see that this now shows up as a choice for a shipping or a transfer out reason. So as long as it exists in that 1630 through 1639 range, it will show up here. Now, of course, I don't want to use this right now because there's no ledger tied to it. If you are keeping track of your books using the general ledger module. So that being said, before I use that, I would probably want to come here and make sure that reference to is referencing that 120-0 and have some sort of place for it to go. Let's just throw it into like a, I don't know. I don't really have an example in mind. Let's just put it into telephone. You would probably actually create a specific transfer category for it to go into. For what it's worth, while we're here, we can see that a number of these actually just reference inventory shrinkage. So delete inventory, lost or stolen, and damaged or destroyed. These are all going to a shrinkage account in your ledger expense. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need all 3 of those. You can still run reports. If I go to the reports menu and transfers, and within inventory, we can see there's the report for inventory transfers in or out. And when you run this report, you can differentiate transfers for one reason versus another. So there's still some value to having specific reasons, even if on the bookkeeping side, they're all hitting the ledger the same way. Now, we talked about pending transfers. I want to circle back on what it means to be a pending transfer. If you recall, I did a choice of ship back to vendor, and in most cases, the vendor still wants you to have that product to sell. So they might go ahead and fix the problem and then send it back to you, or they might actually send you an alternative product for the purposes of selling a similar SKU. It might be the same SKU, just a different serial number, or it might just be an all-out replacement. Either way, we technically already received the original one. We don't want to receive it again because we still were invoiced for that original receive. We don't want to put it into the receive process again because suddenly now there would be another one that we would have to account for invoicing. So what we can do is we can transfer it back in. If we go to the transfer options, let me shrink this down a little bit again. See if I can't make this work here. Let's see. Let's if I just make this go back to fitting to the screen. I'm just getting back into the office again, so you'll have to excuse me as I kind of get my broadcasting stream back into my back into the swing of things here. Okay, I think that's good. All right, so I want to make sure you can see where I was going. So management and, or not management, transfer options. We're going to go to transfer inventory in. And you'll notice when I first come in here, and again, it's kind of hard to see. I'll just put it right in the middle of the screen. You can see it's checkmarked to list pending transfers only. And that's checkmarked by default. So you can see here's the transfer I just did. A pending transfer means that we expect something else to happen with it, usually in the form of a transfer back in. Now, of course, I could uncheck that, and then you can see here's one from a few months ago, a lost or stolen transfer out. I could technically work with that one as well. Maybe I actually found it, and now I want to transfer it back in. It was, you know, collecting dust underneath a back shelf or something like that. But either way, pending simply is a way to highlight those that we expect to have it coming back in one way, shape, or form. So let's go ahead and double click on it to select it. And now we can be brought to the transfer in program. And we can see here's the quantity that I had previously transferred out. I have not previously transferred it back in. I'm simply going to come in here and put in a quantity received. If this were a serialized item, the serial number would be right here. And what I could technically do is I could make an adjustment. It's not going to let me do that here on the SKU. But if this were a serialized item, I could click right into that SKU field where the serial number would be. And let's say they sent me a different serial number back. I could change the serial number right there so that I've got proper tracking, especially for those of you who are in the firearms industry. When you transfer something out, especially when you transfer it back to the vendor, the disposition entry for your gun book will record that appropriately, and then transferring it back in like this will transfer it in, and if you need to transfer in a different serial number, this would be how you could do that. So ultimately, when I hit save on this, that will move that item back into my inventory. Here is the quote-unquote receipt for that. We can see it is attached to that RMA still, and now it's coming back into my inventory. So that when I go and look at the inventory history for my good friend and yours, RT14, there it is being transferred back in, shipped back from vendor, essentially, if you want to think of it that way. So that's essentially the whole idea of inventory transfers. Now, if you want to have your custom transfer reasons default to that pending flag, there is a system variable that controls that. So let's hop in here and look for that. So we can see, is it this one? Here we go, down here, transfer pending cats. You can see this says list the categories for transfer inventory out that should default to a pending status. If more than one, you can separate with a pipe. That is the straight up and down on your keyboard. I don't know if I can do this or not, but it is this key right here. It may be differently on other keyboards, but it's usually the shift key above your enter key. It may be on different areas of your keyboard, depending on your keyboard type. But it's usually going to be a straight up and down line, or in some cases it might be a straight up and down dashed line. Either way, that's a pipe. So if we wanted to put in that other one that we just did, the live stream example, I'd put that pipe in and make this be 1632 as well as 1636. And as soon as I save that, now when I go to do my transfer, and you'll notice as soon as I select the live stream example, it will flag it as pending. Now for what it's worth, the if enabled, the transfer inventory program will default to showing only the pending transfers. This is what I was kind of discussing when you go to transfer it back in. If we go back to that program, so transfer back in. This is what I was talking about where this is checkmarked by default. If this is not checked, then when you go to that program, you'll notice it's not checked here. So just something to keep in mind if you'd like to tweak that as well. Now, I want to kind of finish up with talking about store-to-store transfers. So for those of you who do track more than one store location in your AIM system, and you receive a product at one location, and for whatever reason you need to transfer it to that alternative location, your second or your third or your 16th location, you can do that. You don't have to transfer it out and transfer it back in as of a different location. You can simply go to the transfer options and do a store-to-store transfer. And when you do that store-to-store transfer, and it is mentioning here if I'm making use of the A&D book, the store-to-store in transit must be set to be true. So for those of you who are firearm stores, you'll want to make sure you do have this system variable set accordingly to be flagged as true for the purposes of your bound book tracking. That's probably because I do have categories in here that are flagged as A&D books. So I am actually going to go ahead and need to set that. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at that. So here's the store-to-store in transit. We're just going to make this be a capital Y. We can see here it says make sure that you do not have any open store-to-store transfers before changing that. Now that I've changed that, when I go to the transfer store-to-store, we can see that this is going to ask for what location it's coming from, which it defaults to the location you're at, and what transfer location should it be going to. From there, we can then put in the quantities and the SKUs, and you can see it basically just goes back and forth between quantity and SKU for each product. I don't know if can't remember if I have any other products here. I know I do. Let's go with some Mighty Fresh as well. So you can kind of see it's basically building that list of things to transfer from one store to another. This is all going to be based off of the date, and it will keep track of this with a transfer number. If there's any notes that go with that, I can put those down here. If you are building a transfer list outside of the system, say for example in Excel, and you want to simply bring that in, you can do so. You can click this import button, and it will let you know what we expect in those columns. Column A should be the SKU or serial, and column B should be the quantity. So that way you don't have to do it manually here in AIM. You can build that list outside of AIM in Excel and then import that in. If you're using those LDX data collectors, there is a utility that builds this list exactly for you so that you can just use that to go around and scan your products and then pull that in. And then ultimately, when we hit save, this will print a receipt. Kind of think of this as a packing slip that goes with that. So it's got the transfer number, transferred from, transferred to, and then the items that are going to go on that transfer, so that when the items do get to their destination, they would come in and they would receive those store transfers. So let's mimic this as if I'm now at Iowa City. Here's the transfer. We select it, and then did we in fact get all of them? So yes, we did. We can put those in right there. You can see when I do that, they turn green, And then if I'd like, I can print labels for them from here. If you are wanting to just scan them as you're kind of pulling them out of the box, there's a scan item button down here so that you can just scan them as you're pulling them out, and it'll increase those quantities as you go. And then ultimately saving that, we will then confirm that they in fact did get into my Iowa City location. So transferred and quantity received and the date that they came in. And once again, that will all be tracked in the inventory history. So there's the transfer out, there's the transfer back in, and then there is the transfer Dubuque to Iowa City. So keeping track of your inventory is hopefully as straightforward as that. So again, none of this activity impacts your sales reports. So, unless there's some other reason why you would want it to hit a sale, feel free to do that. I know there are some instances from an accounting perspective where it's better to record the sale as of like a $0 sale, but that's something that you'll probably want to strategize with your bookkeepers and your CPAs, those who know way more than I do as to the reasons why you might want to do that. But hopefully this has made sense. Let me know over to the right if you have any questions. Feel free to type those right into that chat box. And then the next live stream session will be, let me pull up my calendar here. The next live stream session will be next Tuesday, and that's going to be going over keeping track of deliveries. So going into what a delivery ticket is, taking a look at schedules, keeping track of maybe rentals that need to be delivered to schools and all kinds of things like that. So we'll be looking at a lot of different strategies with that. And the schedule for November, right? We're in October. Yep, right. So the schedule for November is, as you may notice over here to the playlist, is not yet set. Definitely click to the poll up there at the top and let me know what your suggestions are for the webinar and live stream topics, because I want to make sure that you're getting out what you need from these live stream sessions. Back on the video section, you can always choose the playlist for recent live streams if you want to go back and take a look at the backlogs of these recorded sessions. They get put in there always, and then they always get put into relevant other playlists as well. So like, for example, this one on transfers will not only be in the recent live streams playlist, but also in the inventory playlist. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. I may even put it into the general ledger playlist as well, since we did touch on some accounting details. But I'm not seeing any questions coming in, so let's go ahead and call this session, call it a good one. So thank you so much for your attendance and your attention, and we hope to see you next Tuesday. If there's any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to give our support team a call. You can also email me. You can get in touch with me at training@tritechretail.com. If you have any inquiries about other training options, definitely let me know as well. We can do personalized one-on-one online sessions. We can also host you here at our offices in Dubuque, Iowa, and I'm more than willing to actually come to your store as well. So definitely let us know what we can do to help you out. And until then, we will see you next time. Take care, and I hope you can make it a great day.